The human race, the most intelligent species on Earth. While we mostly use this intellect for our benefit, we can also use it to start pretty bad things like war. Humans like power, and we fight for power so much that we had not only one, but 2 world wars so far. Today, we'll be discussing the First World War, the one to start it all. Now, before we begin, let's define war. What is war? Well, war is when at least 2 parties in disagreement start fighting. Let's say that you and your sibling have a fight over the last bag of chips. You both start fighting over it. That could be classified as a war. Usually, however, large-scale wars are very violent and result in massive loss of human life. But war always has significant reasons to start. The reason you and your sibling are fighting is because of the chips bag. The reason World War I started, well, they're much more complicated and definitely much more significant. Let's define World War I and look at the reasons that it started. What was World War I? World War I was a 4-year-long violent dispute between many European nations as well as America and some Asian countries. There was a total of over 30 countries in World War I. The dispute started over several reasons, but the one that broke out the tension was the one that initiated the War Act. So the reasons for the First World War can be summed up in 4 reasons: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Together, they can form the acronym MAIN. But what do these words even mean? Well, militarism is when a country starts increasing its army's power and militial abilities to prepare for conflict. However, when other countries see this, they get a bit worried. They start to build up their own army's power. For the bag of chips example, this is like you starting to train your strength so you can give a strong punch to your sibling. Your sibling would see you do this and then start training as well. With countries getting more and more powerful with their armies, something was bound to happen between them. What are alliances? Alliances are agreements between 2 or more parties to aid each other when one of them is in trouble. Let's go back to the bag of chips example. Let's say your mom joins your side. She tells your sibling that the chips belong to you, but your sibling calls for your dad, and your dad says that the chips belong to them. The family is split into alliances between you and your mom against your sibling and your dad. This splitting between European nations caused some countries to hate each other and form strong tension. Imperialism is when countries start abusing their colonies and start fighting for more. Let's say that your brother has a toy sword, but he kept using it badly and now it's kind of broken. He will look at your toy weapons. The toys are yours though, and you don't want him snooping on your belongings. In this case, the European nations had abused their colonies and looked to the colonies of their neighbors, which increased tension. The final reason was nationalism. Nationalism is basically patriotism. Each country was proud of itself and had a huge ego to be the best. To compare to our analogy, it resembles you being so proud that you believe that you are entitled to those chips simply because you're better. Your sibling also believes that they're the better person and the one worthy of the chips. Okay, so these are the 4 main reasons of World War I. But these were all just a warm-up. What actually led the war to happen? Well, before we dive into that, we need to analyze our alliances here. World War I was split into 2 groups, the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. The Central Powers consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and for some time, Italy. The Allied Powers included France, Britain, Russia. America and Italy later on joined in the war. Austria-Hungary had an important archduke at the time named Franz Ferdinand. He was killed by a Bosnian terrorist group. This is where the declarations of war start to happen. The first declaration of war was Austria-Hungary to Serbia. Russia began aiding Serbia and mobilizing troops towards Austria-Hungary and Germany. Germany took this mobilization of Russia's army as a declaration of war, so they declared war on Russia. Germany also declared war on France. Because of this, Britain declared war on Germany. This is the start of World War I when all the countries start declaring war. This was the beginning phase. World War I lasted for 4 years among many countries, so naturally many intricate plans, attacks, and strategies were used. One of the highlighting strategies of World War I was trench warfare. It's arguably the biggest part of the entire war. Trench warfare was when the countries dug trenches that stretched on for miles to defend themselves from enemy fire. Many soldiers suffered terrible lives in there. The men practically lived in mud, Diseases spread everywhere, sleep and food were very little. It was a mess. The land between trenches was a common ground that was attacked and defended by both sides. It therefore earned the name no man's land, since it didn't belong to anyone in particular. Other dangers of trenches included the dangers of sudden attacks like grenades or poisonous gas that the enemy soldiers could not escape from in the trenches. Other types of technology and weaponry used in World War I included machine guns, grenades, artillery, along with essentially new weapons such as submarines, warplanes, and tanks. These were all devastating, destructive weapons that resulted in massive loss of human life. A famous plan used in World War I was called the Schlieffen Plan. It was named after the person who created it, Alfred von Schlieffen. The plan called for attacking and defeating France in the west and then rushing east to fight Russia. The Germans felt that this would work, because Russia was lagging behind. However, French allies aided them and arrived on the Western Front to make Germany call for a retreat. This plan was part of the most important battle in World War I, the First Battle of Marne. While the plan ultimately failed, the war on the Western Front still remained at a stalemate. There were many more events to cover in World War I, as it was such a huge part of human history. In 1918, the war ended when Germany surrendered, and in 1919, Germany and Britain, France, Italy, Russia, and all other countries signed the Treaty of Versailles, formally ending the war. It was a joyous time of celebration as the time of despair and destruction has come to an end. Until the Germans struck again in 1939.